You ever felt like somebody had the right of it and the wrong of it all at the sort of same time? I actually want to talk a little bit about some of what was brought up in the Black Men Trust Black Women Roundtable done by Sister Song. And specifically, I want to address how there seems to be a conversation about Clifton Powell being disruptive. But first, the intro. And welcome back to another episode of the Daily Donna with me, your host, Dr. Donna. I am your sex and relationship therapist in the Washington, D.C. metro area, your author of Drink Water and Mind Your Business, a Black woman's guide to unlearning the BS and healing self-esteem. And if you have not watched that conversation, I think that all of that 1 hour, 46-minute conversation, I may not be right on that 46-minute. Either way, I think that conversation is definitely worth a complete walkthrough. And I recognize that the standout in the conversation, as far as beef, tussling, where people are a little bit upset, is Clifton Powell. Now, Clifton Powell had many things to say and talked a lot about being, I guess, defensive. I feel like I think the thing that comes to mind for me is this African proverb, right? And it's something like a wise man has something to say, a fool has to say something. Now, mind you, I do not think that this man is a fool, but it got to a point where he was feeling some type of way. He had his back up and he turned his ears off, right? Because another African proverb, or maybe it's an African proverb because my African mother keep telling it. You have two ears and one mouth. Use them according to their number. I think that he was interested in listening to a point. Now, the point that I think a lot of us saw was when they started to tussle a little bit, and the words got a little bit heated. I thought that actually that whole conversation and some of the stuff that he was saying was, I think there's some learning to be done there. So the first piece that I actually wanted to bring up is I think that Clifton made a really great point about Black folk inheriting the BS and that it is not Black people's fault for the circumstances that sort of wrought what we've experienced, right? But there is also something to be said about doing your part to make things better when you do know. Now, he said that, at his big age, that he didn't know that he wasn't doing the thing correctly, that he wasn't loving correctly, that he wasn't, I guess that he wasn't sort of like that he wasn't coming as correct as he could. And he talked about commending his partner for being with him. And I was just like, you commend your partner for putting up with abuse from you that likely made them feel small and hurt. And you made the joke about being monogamous only that day. And I was just like, it was a joke. I felt like it was a little bit in poor taste given what they were there to talk about and given where the conversation went. There was a lot of conversation about protecting and provision, which was not all that unexpected, right? But it got me thinking this piece around unconscious, conscious, and dysconsciousness. Where it comes to what is owed as far as our behavior goes and how we what we see as being maybe the wrong end of our own behavior. I definitely agree. You don't know what you don't know until you know it, right? Except that there are stages of getting to the place not only where you know but where you will do something with that knowledge, right? Because while I understand that people like to skip the step and say when you know better you do better, I'm looking like when you know better you have an opportunity to do better, but you have to actually change your behaviors first, and most of us are not as invested in the part where we have to do the change. And I like that he said, you can't fix shit you don't know about. However, it felt like he was also using it as an excuse. And not even just him, right? I feel that that saying is often used as an excuse to shirk any level of responsibility. And that's where the unconscious, conscious, and dysconsciousness come in, right? So the things that you are unconscious about, there's literally nothing that you can do about it, right? I even have talked about and helped clients work through like a Johari's window. So Johari's window boasts 4 window planes. There's the self that you know and show. There's the self that you have that is private and that maybe a few select people know. There is the blind self, what other people can see, but you cannot. And then there is the undiscovered self. You simply have not discovered it. You've not been put in the situation. You've not done the learning. You've not done the living that would give you that. All right, cool, bet there. And I think of the conscious, unconscious, and dysconscious somewhat similarly, right? The conscious is what you know and show, right? That's that first piece of the window pane. It's what you're for sure knowing, what you're for sure seeing, what you're for sure, you're there. And the the unconscious is what you don't know, right? So I would say that's probably somewhere between like the blind self and the undiscovered self, right? It's not something that you are privy to. The conscious, yes. The unconscious, no. But the dysconscious is that place where you're purposefully not looking because you know that in looking, it will now be conscious, which means that you don't not know. You just decided not to look. And I find it very difficult to believe. And this is why I think that most things are dysconscious, not unconscious. I find it very difficult to believe that you've been with several people who very likely have said you hurt them, you harmed them. Hey, this is what I need. Hey, you're not giving me this thing that I want, this need. This is how I want to be loved. This is how you show me love. Let me show you love so that, you know, I find it very difficult to believe that you can spend your life interacting with other people and still be completely unconscious. I think that we are dysconscious at best. And I think that we are lying because we feel ashamed at worst. Saying that you don't know, that you weren't loving well, but you've had various partners and lovers who very likely have spoken up and advocated for themselves, but you chose not to listen to them. It's not the same thing as saying you didn't know. It's saying that you didn't value what you were hearing and you refused to take a closer look to learn better. And it's not the same thing as I didn't know, and so I couldn't do anything differently. And, maybe this is also part of like, this is like my thing, right? And this is something that I would say that my husband and my sisters and some of my friends have been known to call me in for. I believe that all people are way smarter than anyone else will give them credit for, right? And so I do not believe that Clifton is a fool. I believe that he is smart. I believe he has a lot of knowledge. He was talking about a variety of things across the spectrum of mental, emotional health and well being. And I don't know that he has yet wisdom in order to not to know the thing, right? Anyone can be intelligent, right? To know things is one thing. Wisdom is to use that thing that you know, right? To speak about defensiveness while being defensive. It's kind of like, hey, hi pot, what up kettle, right? There was a little bit of that, and yet he was not wrong in what he was saying. However, there for me is where I always wonder, what is the other agenda, right? And a person will usually let their agenda be known in what they do or do not say and how they do or do not say something. So he was already excusing himself by saying in Africa they were polygamists. Everybody wasn't a polygamist. Everyone wasn't a polygamist. And a lot of it was a matriarchy, not a patriarchy. So it's like, when you say it, what are you getting at? Right? The idea that monogamy is unnatural is a lie. Being poly is also not unnatural. Both of these are, I would say, natural things among a spectrum. And I can respect that they were like, yeah, a therapist this, a therapist that. And I just like, geez, there was a lot of binaries going on in the conversation, like polygamy better than monogamy. And a sort of use of some of the knowledge as a way to protect the way he wanted to live, which is not the same thing as saying, here is all this vastness of knowledge, and I recognize these things are on a spectrum. That is why I said it felt like there was an agenda there, that the agenda was, I am not a bad person, or I don't want to feel shame or guilt for some of my behaviors. And so I have enough knowledge that I can use to excuse myself and absolve myself from my own behaviors, from my own missteps, from and protect myself from the ways that I've harmed others. This is something that I would say is sometimes it's difficult to really sit in and process, especially, he's talking about therapy while also kind of implying that he hasn't gone, that he hasn't been, and that maybe he would like to go. And I guess it's just like, there felt like there was a want to maintain power by using therapeutic knowledge as a cover for fuck shit. And I think that is the part that, for me, if we're going to say something felt disruptive, that would be the part that felt disruptive. It was the use of this language and the use of his knowledge to sort of cover and shield himself in a space where I thought they all had like an aim to sort of be vulnerable with one another. And some vulnerability did come out, but I think it specifically came out when he could no longer hold on to the facade of elevated, detached elder. And because he got called in directly by that one brother there, who I think did, quite frankly, I think in many ways he did Black women proud, because he called it in and was just like, Black men, older Black men choose to live their lives exactly the way they want to until they are 60, 70, 80. And now there maybe some of the options of, maybe their body parts don't play in the same way that they would still play if they could. They want somebody who will be there for them, that will sort of take care of them in their old age while having ignored doing any pouring into before then. People want to live the way they want to live, and then they want to settle down in time to be taken care of by somebody else. And I think that's what Homeboy was calling him in on. And I was just like, appreciated. And I don't think that Clifton was quite ready to hear that, to sit with that, to maybe even it felt maybe exposing in that way, that someone would see that, call it in, and stand on the business of it, like would not release the pressure. And I think that because like that whole exchange and then what happened thereafter with the way that I felt like Clifton was trying to find himself back in himself and maybe even regain that footing. Like, I certainly felt like a secondhand embarrassment. I was just like, my brother, breathe, relax, you're okay. Like, you're not under threat. But I think that's also the other piece of it, right? Like, when someone calls us in, when someone sees past the facade, part of what can happen is that, our sympathetic nervous system takes hold. It gets rooted, right? It's flight, fight, freeze, fawn. And I can't listen anymore when I'm elevated in that way. I can't hear in the same way. I can't learn in the same way. And that type of disruption to the nervous system, you have to regulate it before y'all can move forward. And I think that's what we saw, right? Like that disruption that we're talking about, he was dysregulated, or I would suspect that he was dysregulated. I cannot say, I do not know this man. I am only supposing based off what I've seen. But it was quite interesting to watch. And I'll say that my initial reaction, this is my response video, right? But my initial reaction was like, wow, he's really disruptive. And I kind of want him to be quiet because I feel like this conversation could have gone somewhere else. And I feel like that's life. I think that he needed to be there. He needed to even be disruptive in that way. He needed to live, his body needed to be living sort of the truth of whatever he was thinking, feeling, etc. Because that's the truth of how it goes, right? You have someone, you have your conscious sleaze, you have your people who've done this additional work in that way, right? And are open and sort of trying to guide other men in these type of conversations. And you have those who want to be a part of that conversation but have not yet reconciled the harm that they have done, have not yet maybe gone through the steps of that the 5-step apology, not only to people that they have harmed where they may need to make some restitution, but also to self. Because one of the things that like truly disturbed me, in the sense that it got on my damn nerves, where he kept on saying like, fix us, fix us, fix us. Like we need a therapist to fix us. And I'm just like, you're not broken, my guy. You're not broken. And while I recognize that some of y'all are like, yeah, he is. No, because not only is he a product of his time, I know nobody wants to hear that as an answer. Not only is it being a product of the time, we also have to consider whether or not the behavior was adaptive. That's what I end up thinking about in therapy, right? A lot of people are upset about how they used to do or whatever the thing is that they were doing. People are always so upset with themselves. And I'm like, well, was it adaptive, right? Like, did it work? For whatever thing it was trying to do, did it work? Did it work? Most chances are, yes, it worked. And when it stops working, that is when people are looking for change. When the thing that they have always done no longer works for what they want to do. That is when we are now looking for, okay, I need change and I require help. The problem is fix-it language makes it seem like what you did before didn't work. It worked. If part of what you were hoping in some way, shape, or form was to maintain a distance between yourself and others so that you didn't get hurt, then it worked, right? Like messing around with a bunch of different people and not taking responsibility for your actions protects your ego. It protects your sense of self, especially if your sense of self is rooted in what patriarchy says a man is, right? Because it's whisper, it's air, it's not substantive. It's about as hunger filling as cotton candy. Cotton candy is delicious, but as far as I'm concerned, it has no calories and it has no consequences because it melts on the tongue, and then it was like it was never was there. And that is the same way in which maleness is defined. If maleness is defined simply as not being a woman, then that makes it so that men don't actually know who they are. They only know what they're not. And knowing what you are not is not enough. Knowing that you are not a woman doesn't even give you it doesn't allow you room to build a self-concept. We've talked about this before. Self-concept is required to have self-esteem so that you can have aligned behavior. If the only concept and idea of manhood is based off what someone else has said, and that is to philander, and that is to express violent, dominant power over women, if it is to stick your appendage in as many people as will have you, and low-key, high-key in people who don't want you, if manhood is in money, cars, and clothes, if it's in these certain things, if that is where your manhood is rooted, it is lacking in substance because this ain't manhood. This is a bunch of stuff that somebody decided to put together to control men who wish to control women, who wish to have control by saying they're not women. There's nothing there, which means that not only do you not know yourself, you can't like yourself. You can only like the performance that you put on for what someone told you manhood was, which is simply based off not being a woman. Being Black is substantive, right? There are many things that we could say about being Black, but being white is about not being Black. It lacks substance. It means that you don't know who you are, which means you can't like who you are. No self-concept, no self-esteem, no aligned behaviors. When the concept is based off someone else's construct, and that is what you're acting out, all you can like is your performance. So the self-concept becomes their given construct, and the so-called self-esteem then becomes basically you grading your performance, as opposed to you grading or you talking about how you feel about who you are. You're really just grading yourself on how well you performed madness today, according to someone else. And I think that what Clifton is talking about is that there's like this shifting of what madness is as more men wake up to, I think, the truth of mental health, wake up to the truth of community, and wake up to the truth that women don't want to be with them if they won't grow. That being able to keep your thumb, as they kept saying, on a woman's forehead is no longer working in the way that it once did, because now women can have things like bank accounts. They make money. We make money. We can buy our own cars, clothes, homes. We can take care of ourselves, and more of us are uninterested in furthering somebody's legacy, right? By giving them progeny. I think that that piece is sort of what he's talking about, right? Like, while also wanting to hang on to the power of his fame, of his money, and absolving himself of any blame for his behaviors. I think that is what made the conversation, I think, that much more interesting. And I think that a part two, hopefully they do a part two. Please do a part two. And if if you have women, invite me. I think that if they did, when they do a part two, hopefully it's with the same people, to bring them back to see how that first conversation, not only how it sat in that moment, but how it, what did it give life to? What did it seed? And what seeds may started to have sprouted from it by the time they get back together in, say, like a month or two or three or whatever. I think that would be interesting. And then to do a similar panel with all women, and then to do a mixed panel. That's what I would want to see. Anyway, let me know in the comments below whether or not you have seen the Black Men Trust Black Women Roundtable. I will link it in the description. And let me know sort of like what's going on to you. Like, if you watched it, do you feel like it was just disruptive, or do you feel like there was something to learn there? This was really sort of like my mental sort of word vomit after having watched it. I think that there were some other things that I really wanted to talk about, like this idea of the natural protector and provider, and like what this actually means. But let me know if any of you want to even see that video. All right, you're the bee's knees. I will see you again tomorrow, because this is the Daily Donna and I am Dr. Donna, where we have those conversations with a slightly therapeutic edge. All right, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.